when you're in a startup, biting off more than you can chew, it's like a badge of honor. What changed the timeline was we got bought.
So you initially came into the project a quarter. He's like, shave a month off, 60 days. Where did it ultimately end up? Welcome back, everybody, to Growth Misadventures, where we explore the real stories behind successful businesses, but we're not here for the success story. We're actually here for the insights and the lessons from the moments that almost derailed it. My name is Liam. I'm your host. And today we have a very awesome guy and man. I call him the man who doubled Disney. His name is Mason Dorner. And I'm going to read out his bio and his claim to fame because it is quite a bit. And we've grown over the last year or so to have quite the relationship. So I call him the man who doubled Disney, Mason Dorner. He's generated over $1 billion in sales, online sales, working for major corporations such as Comcast and Disney. After he got sick and tired of the corporate rat race, he joined a local Orlando tech startup. So he's actually from my hometown here in Orlando, Stax, as their head of marketing, as one of the first full-time employees. During his time there, he scaled them, helped them scale from $1 million recurring annual revenue to over $100 million in just 4 years, helped them acquire 25,000 customers, and then was part of the team when it sold for over $1 billion under his leadership. Now he is the chief ads officer and co-founder of Ascendant, which is a rapid growth sales and marketing agency where he has consulted for, invested in, and helped to scale 50 plus companies, including many e-com and SaaS platforms, several of which have reached 8 and 9 figure valuations. More recently and excitingly, Mason co-founded Medley Wine Co., a direct-to-consumer e-com organic wine company, which reached a multi-million-dollar run rate within just 30 days of launching. So he's got quite the bio here. Welcome to the show, Mason.
Thanks. It's good to be on. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have somebody of your pedigree on here. So let's dive right into it. Take me to a moment where you felt like things almost came undone, or you hit some sort of pothole, had some sort of blunder or misadventure in general.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the story I'm going to share is actually, it's going back to my Stax days. So I wasn't quite an entrepreneur yet, but I was in a C-level leadership position, with a startup, with an entrepreneurial company, the closest thing I think you could get to being an entrepreneur without like owning the company. And so I was leading marketing, and the company when I joined was called Fat Merchant. It's a credit card processing company. We competed with like Stripe and Square, but when I joined, it was like 50 people or less than 50 people. I was in the first 50 hires, and it was called Fat Merchant at the time, which stood for Fast Affordable Transaction Technology. But it's a funny name. Our logo was a pig, and it was like worked at the time. But as all of a sudden the company got bigger and bigger, and the vision originally was to sell the company, like if they could sell it for $100 million, like they were doing really good. And then like we got to 100 million and everybody was like, I think we can keep going. And so we kept on going and kept on growing it. And there came this realization point between me and the CEO. We were talking of like, we probably need to change the name. Because the goal at some point at that time was to go public or at least have that option. And the idea of having fat be our ticker symbol was kind of horrifying at that point. Like it's cute when you're, a $10 million company or maybe you're a $100 million company, but like we can't have Fat Merchant be the name of $1 billion.
This was prior before Elon Musk made memeing like a publicly acceptable thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were just like, this doesn't really fit us anymore. It was cool when we were like the young, scrappy kids in Orlando, but now it's like, this is a real thing with big investors behind it. And, it's like this big, shiny, fancy tech company. Now, also, we're handling people's money. We're handling their merchant accounts. And so that we just kind of came to the realization of it's time to evolve and it's time to change the name, change the identity, which that's a massive undertaking for any marketer. It's a once in a career opportunity to do a full rebrand. And at the time that we did it, we were a 9-figure company. So we were pretty big. We had hundreds of employees. Our logo and our name was on a million different pieces of collateral. And it was like, we're going to change the name. We're going to change the logo. And so that was the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my career. And that's where the misadventure is, because there was so much learning on so many different levels, and a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures, a lot of screw ups through that process. We ended with something really amazing that I'm so proud of to this day. And I know Sanira, the CEO or former CEO that founded the company, is also super proud of with the identity that we came up with. But that was the hardest thing that I had ever done in my career. And I think the hardest thing anybody on my team had ever done in their career. I mean, we all got pushed to our absolute limits, bit off more than we could chew. And there's just a ton of learning on multiple fronts that came through that misadventure.
Yeah. Well, now that we have the context of the story here, let's go deeper into it. So, I mean, what was the thing that knocked you on your butt, and what was made this such a misadventure and the biggest one of your career, as you say?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was biting off more than I or we could chew, and then also not holding firm on boundaries were kind of the two learnings. Now, when you're in a startup, biting off more than you can chew, it's like a badge of honor. It's like part of the culture. But there is a moment where that goes too far, and a point in a company's journey where you have to flip from that and start being a little bit more realistic with your goals and timelines, because you're not a tiny little 30-person company anymore, where you can break process and move really quickly and innovate and figure new things out. Like, this is a 100+ person company. You can still move fast, but you can't move as fast. And so
what was that? What was that particular example of like biting off more than you could chew? Like, what was that moment, or that
really the timeline? The timeline for the branding to get live with the new name. So, and there's even more context there, which is that we went through a transaction kind of during the rebrand process. So nobody knew that we were changing the name of the company, but we had been working with an agency also out of Orlando. They're called Big Vision. They're awesome. But we had been working with them to come up with the new name, the new logo. We've been at it for a couple months. And we basically, around the time that we finished, hey, here's what it's going to be, we also went through a transaction, got basically a new owner. They didn't buy 100% of the company, but they bought controlling interest. And so we had this moment of like, oh, well, I really hope they like the new name and logo that for the company that they just bought, that is now going to completely change its identity. And
so wait, hold on. Let me back up here. So this decision, where'd this decision come from? Like, you were talking to the CEO one day, or the CEO came to you one day, is like, hey, Mason, we need to, I know you're kind of painting the picture, but like, how did that decision come to be? It was over time that you guys were talking about it, or is it just like something that was sent down from the top? Like, here's the directives.
No, so it started off as we had a product that was called Omni, and that's a very hard name to own. Our platform is called Omni, but if you Google Omni, there's Omni Hotels and 100 other brands. We were like, okay, we need to change the name of our product because it's just never gonna stand out from all these other things with the same name. So it started off as renaming the product. And then as we got deeper into renaming the product, it was like, well, this is already going to be a lot of work, because the product and the company were almost like, they were 50-50 in terms of the branding. Like, we showed both equally. And so it's like, we're already, if we rebrand the product, we're already going to have to change so many things. We should just go ahead and change the whole company name, because also the new product name and logo looked so much cooler and so much better than the existing Fat Merchant branding. It was like, this isn't going to fit. The logos are already on everything together. Like, we're going to need to just change the whole thing.
Okay, and the name that we had come up. This was more of like a collaborative process that happened like gradually over time. It's like, we're diving into this project, but while we're doing this, we should probably just take care of this as well.
Yeah, so, about a month into the like rebranding exercise, or maybe even a couple of weeks, that's when we realized, we really need to change like the whole thing. And that happened over several conversations between me and the CEO.
Gotcha.
And just through us sitting in sessions with our new branding agency, that was kind of decided.
And then, so from that point on, like, I'm guessing the biting off more than you can chew was like the time frame of that. Like, once you guys made that decision, you guys set a very, like, was it a 90-day goal, 180-day goal? Like, what was it exactly?
Yeah, so the goal was to have our branding set by the end of Q4. Have the agency process done, which we did that, right? So like, we had our decision, we had, hey, here's what it's going to be. What changed the timeline was we got bought. And so we had just finished, here's the new name, here's the new logo. But before we started activating on it, like, we hadn't announced it to anybody in the company. It was still top secret. And then a big PE firm came in and bought us. And so we are like, that was where we go, oh, well, hope they like the new name. They just bought this company. It's not going to be called that anymore. And so we kind of had to,
like, there wasn't disclosed. I mean, I don't know if you were a part of this conversation. Like, it wasn't disclosed at all while the PE talks are happening, huh?
No.
Wow.
Because it also wasn't done. So they came in and bought us, and they came to visit us. And my very first meeting with the founder of this PE firm, which this guy's a billionaire, my first time meeting him was selling him on the new branding. And our goal was to activate the branding in a quarter. So announce to the company, start swapping out, everything, build the new website, and then announce like first week of April, basically is what we were going for. And that's very aggressive to swap out all of your branding, build a brand new website, rebrand your product, your tech platform. Like it's a lot of pieces of collateral that get touched. So even doing it in a quarter, super, super aggressive because we like to move fast. So my initial timeline that I gave was the most aggressive thing that I thought was reasonable. But then in that meeting, he loved the branding. So awesome, cool. And he's like, how fast can you do it? And I'm like, I've committed to a quarter. And he said, you need to do it faster. And I am like, oh, shit. Well, I just met this guy. He owns the company now.
Yes.
Like, is my first interaction going to be telling him no? And so I kind of said, okay, I'll take a look at it. We'll figure it out. Cool. And so I went out of that meeting. And honestly, I shaved a month off the timeline, and that was foolhardy and that was unwise in retrospect. But I had looked at it as like, we have moved so many mountains at this company. We have done so many things that are impossible on timelines that are impossible. We'll figure it out. That proved to be false. And so that's kind of where the misadventures, came from, was that I shaved 30% off the timeline. We're not a big team. We had like an 8 or 10 person marketing team. There was no redundancies. We had like one graphic designer, one copywriter, one developer.
Then the graphic decoders, updating the UI and all that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we were a small team for, at that time, a $400 million company. That's like what we got, acquired for at that point was around there. Yeah. But so that's kind of where I should have held my ground. I should have stuck to my guns and stuck to my boundaries. I wasn't prepared for that question. It's also weird meeting your new boss and then getting like this directive from them. Yeah. So I shaved 30% off the timeline. We worked crazy hours in order to get that done. Where I really underscoped too was on custom rebuilding an enterprise level website, because that was another leg up. Our old website under Fat Merchant was a great website, but it was a mid-market website, let's call it. It was built, on WordPress. It wasn't a custom theme. And so this was our first, and the website had existed and just been modified over and over and upgraded for like 5 years, 4 years, whatever.
This was a rebuild.
This was a rebuild from scratch. And it's like, we're building a custom theme, a custom back end. Yeah. So everything totally custom, which I had never done before. And it's hard. And I had never managed a creative. I managed websites and I built websites before. And so that's why I kind of overscoped, or I guess underscoped, I should say, how hard it was going to be. Because this is a whole different level when you're building a brand new website that's completely custom for a $1 billion company with one in-house developer and one freelancer.
And a couple hundred pages, I had assumed you had to go through.
It was a lot. And I mean, they're still using the same website now. You can check it out at stackspayments.com. It looks awesome. I'm still super proud of it. But yeah, that's where we kind of blew the timeline, was on the website development, because it was a really heavy lift. And I'm a marketer. I'm not a developer. So it was a crash course in development. And I'll say, just to make, so I understand this, like you were basically like coordinating with the graphic designer, like, hey, let's put this here, let's put that there, let's tweak this, let's do this, writing the copy, etc. Finalize, the visual version, and then send it over to the developer to actually implement it on the code side. Yeah, everything. Yeah. We did 100% of that part of the project. Like, we outsourced the development of logos and, lookbook and stuff like that. But everything else was in-house. Our team.
You touched pretty much every page you touched.
Yeah. Our designer, our developer, our copywriter. It's a really big lift. And so that's where we got ourselves into trouble, was on the development of that website. Because again, I had built websites. I'd never built a website like this. I never managed a project at this scale. And so that was a really crash course. Now, I think what I did right is I did finally wave the white flag when I realized we were in trouble and going to miss deadlines.
I was going to say, where did it end up? So you initially came into the project a quarter. He's like, shave a month off, 60 days. Where did it ultimately end up?
So I did wave a white flag and I asked for help, but I was like, we're not going to hit. We're not going to make it. I'm like, we're upside down on this. And I basically went to the CEO and said, I don't know what to do here. I'm in over my head. I need some help. And so that's where we pulled in our CTO. So he is a developer. He knows how to manage developers. He's built stuff this big and bigger before. Yeah. And that was what helped a lot to get us back on track and to fix it. We still didn't hit the deadline. But I'd say that asking for help from the right person instead of just like watching the ship go down all the way was kind of a big turning point for us. Because again, I'm a marketer, I'm not a developer. So bringing in our company's best developer, our CTO, helped fill in a bunch of the knowledge gaps that I had in terms of a project of this scale and co-managing alongside him. Now we pushed back and we ended up going live. So this is interesting. And this is why I say boundaries are important, because I had originally scoped this. I think we can get this done and be live the first week of April. Mm-hmm. When it was all said and done, we ended up going live to the public on April 20th. Everything was basically done and complete April 14th. So my initial estimate was only off by 1 week. If I had stuck to my guns and held that boundary, we would have been right on the money, which also would have been super impressive. Rebranding a $400 million company and activating in 90 days, still very impressive, still very fast. And so that's where I shot myself in the foot, is I went from, I could have been a hero by just executing the original plan, but instead I didn't hold my boundaries. So then that caused some unrealistic expectations to get set. Yeah. And so instead of being a hero, I wound up with egg on my face.
Oh, really? So you did get a little push, like, fire back.
Yeah, I mean, I made those commitments, and ultimately it wasn't, it was a little bit foolhardy, and we weren't able to make it happen on the new timeline. So that was the big lesson, was just setting those boundaries and sticking to it.
Process of a public. So is it like a SPAC basically a SPAC that happened or something?
No, it was a PE firm that came in and bought us. Okay. And at the end of it, look, it all worked out. Like I
was going to say, it seemed to work out good. You still have the name on your resume and everything like that.
Yeah. It wasn't like a career ruining thing or whatever, but it was a huge project and it affected a lot of people. When we missed that deadline, like we also had to rebrand the tech platform that all of our clients worked in, right? So our tech team, our product team, they hit their deadline.
Hey, on this date, we're going to be live. And then that day comes,
they had the product ready to go with the new branding. And then they had to undo it and then redo it again, a month later. So it affected a lot of people throughout the company, because a rebrand affects literally everyone and everything in a company. So that was the kind of the part that sucked a little bit in terms of it's a very public operation. The whole company's seeing this. That being said, I'm super proud of it. We ultimately, and again, I got it done on the original timeline that I said I thought we could do it on. So that's where I go, stick to the boundaries. Even when it's a superior, like, don't tell them what they want to hear. And I wasn't I wasn't being misleading. I genuinely thought, because we had done so much impossible stuff, we would find a way. Ultimately, we didn't. The original timeline, which was super aggressive, ended up being the right one. And so that's where I should have stuck to the boundaries.
Absolutely.
I'll also talk some about just like the team dynamics. Like, it was a lot of hours. We pushed our team. I can imagine my team to the absolute
12, 14 hours a day, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're talking people working 12-hour days for an entire quarter. Our one developer, even more than that. He was working like 16-hour days. So it was, from a people management perspective, was definitely challenging, keeping the morale up, making sure, that everybody stayed positive and that we continued to push towards the goal and nobody like blew up or quit or anything like that. And there was definitely a few, tense moments among some of us on the team, where I had to kick a little bit of ass to like keep people moving forward because they, got frustrated or whatever. It was a definite exercise, in management skills for me, all of us going through the toughest thing we've ever gone through together. And me as the leader, having to keep them moving forward. And again, we all crossed the finish line together. Nobody quit. Nobody got fired. Everybody was pumped when we got across the line. I think it's probably the greatest thing on all of their resumes too, because it is on mine.
Yeah, 100%.
So ultimately, we still won and we still got it across the finish line. And today, it's that logo, that name is on $1 billion company.
Like you said, it's still live to this day. What is it, 5-6 years later? So that is, I can't imagine, being in there and that team just pumping. Sounds like fun, but sounds a little stressful. But last few minutes here, let's kind of decompress. Let's talk about what you do outside of when you're not growing $1 billion companies. What are you doing, man? Because I know you have a couple of hobbies yourself, and you do board meetings, as you like to call them.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, the main hobby is working. That sounds terrible, but I just love building companies. So we do that through our agency, through Ascend It. We've also got our wine company that we launched. So, I mean, wine's been kind of something I've been interested in and that my wife's always been into. We got the opportunity to work on a wine company. It was one of our clients through Ascend It a couple of years ago. And it just took off like crazy, did really, really well. And then myself, my co-founder, one of the co-founders of that wine company, we all left as time went on, and then got back together to do another one, basically, which is Medley. Yeah. And that's taken off like crazy. So it's been fun now. Working in the industry has made it really interesting. So like I'm living in Napa right now. I'm going and visiting lots of wineries, but not going just to like drink. I'm going and I'm asking, and they don't know that I own a wine company. I'm telling them when I walk in there, but I'm asking all kinds of questions